Okay, so today we're going to be talking about solving quadratic equations. And in this segment in particular, we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations using factoring, which is everybody's favorite. Okay, so here's a couple of examples we're going to look at together. The first one is 2x squared plus 15x equals 8. So the very first thing that you need to do when you're solving by factoring is to set your equation equal to 0. So we're going to move this 8 to the left-hand side of the equation. So we would end up with 2x squared plus 15x minus 8 is equal to 0. So now we are looking at the quadratic that is on the left-hand side of the equation, and we are going to use the factoring techniques that we know. And you may recall from prior conversations about factoring that first we would look for a greatest common factor. And if I look at these three terms, 2x squared, 15x, and negative 8, there is none. So then we use whatever kind of techniques that we know that we can factor this quadratic that has this leading coefficient of 2. And this is where some of you kind of get tripped up. If you recall in class, we talked about the technique where we multiply the leading coefficient by the constant term, disregarding the signs, and we get a value of 16. From that value, we look at factors of 16 that subtract, because the 8 is negative, to make 15. And of course we know if we were to list those factors of 16, 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4, that the only combinations that subtract to make 15 are the 1 and the 16. So we are going to use those two values in the back end of our set of parentheses. So we've got a 16 in the back of one, a 1 in the back of the other. We're going to put a 2x, and the 2 is coming from the initial or the leading coefficient, a 2x in the front of both of these parentheses. And then we need to just determine which signs we're going to use. And so since we have a negative constant here, the only way to get something negative would be to have one of each sign. So we need a positive and a negative, and the larger of the two values in the back will take whatever sign that second term has. So we're going to have a positive on the 16 and a negative on the 1. Okay, and so we are very close to being done factoring. The last step in this process is to examine each binomial and reduce it by any common factor. Okay, so the 2x minus 1 has no common factor. We leave that alone. The 2x plus 16 does have a common factor of 2, so we divide that out. We're just reducing it, so we're not taking out a common factor and leaving it as a monomial. We're just reducing that binomial. Okay, and so now we have factored the quadratic, and if I were to multiply this out, FOIL, I would end up back here at 2x squared plus 15x minus 8. All right, so now that it's factored, we're going to take each factor and we're going to set them each equal to 0. That's that zero product property, which says that if two things are multiplied together and they have a product of 0, then at least one of them must be 0. So when I do that, then I can go ahead. I've got two linear equations that I can solve for x. So 2x here is equal to 1. X is equal to 1/2. Here, x is equal to negative 8. And so I have solved this equation, and my solutions are 1/2 and negative 8. Okay, I can go back and check and make sure that each of these satisfies the original equation. Always a good idea to do that when you are taking an assessment when it really counts, okay? So let's move on over to this other equation. And we're going to solve this one by factoring as well. This one is a little bit different, and it's a little bit easier. So if I look at this equation, 5x squared plus 20x, and I know that it's already set equal to 0, I am going to use that first rule of factoring, which is look for greatest common factor. And we see that that greatest common factor between these two terms is 5x. So I'm going to factor out a 5x. And now I have 5x times x plus 4 is equal to 0. And I'm going to take each of these factors, set them equal to 0, and solve each one for x. So here we have x is equal to 0, and here we have x is equal to -4. So my solutions are 0 and -4. Okay, so these are two examples of solving a quadratic by factoring. In the next segment, we will look at a different technique.